So I'd like to welcome everybody. Thank you for your patience. I think we got started a little late because the downstairs was so attractive that we got a little distracted. So Eric Dobson is going to talk to us about fair housing, affordable housing, the history, especially as it relates to race, because that's the focus of our program, is let's talk about race. And as he's talking, I think I'd like us to think about the importance of housing and what it means in our society and what it means in ways that we don't even maybe think about, because it's become kind of embedded into our American unconscious, the value of being a property owner or living in a good neighbor and so-called property values, when perhaps what we mean by property values is, my house is worth more if it's in an all-white neighborhood versus an integrated neighborhood. These are the things we don't even think about so much anymore because it's embedded into our culture. So Reverend Eric Dobson has been on the Public Fair Share Housing Center, which is located in South Jersey since 2012, and he's the director of the public engagement portion of the center. Their mission is to end discriminatory and exclusionary housing patterns which have deprived the poor of the opportunity to reside in environments which offer safe, decent, sanitary housing near education and employment opportunities. These are things that some of us take for granted, but it's not always available to everybody. He's also the co-founder of a group called Open Communities, which is a racial integration consulting firm working to resolve simple and complex of race, ethnicity, and socioeconomics. He's also a co-founder of a youth and development organization called Planting Seeds of Hope. And in 2008, was serving as the Pennsylvania Black Clergy Outreach Director for the Obama campaign. So since you probably have guessed, Reverend Eric Dobson is an ordained minister. He holds a BA in religion from Temple University, currently pursuing a Master of Science in Organizational Development and Leadership. Also loves to bike, loves music, and loves to cook. His partner in marriage and ministry is April Dobson, and which they parent 4 children, Amber, Dion, is that the right way? I said Dion, Jasmine, and Jordan. In 2006, Eric received a Community Service Award from the Camden County Board of Chosen Freeholders. In 2007, the Champion of Diversity Award from the Courier Post South. So with no further ado, thank you very much, Eric, for traveling to do this program for us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So one of the things that I guess that I'm bashful about is these introductions because there's nothing celebrity about me. My biggest accomplishment is that out of the 4 children, the youngest is 22. So we have a 31-year-old, 28-year-old, a 26-year-old, and a 22-year-old. And my greatest accomplishment is they still come home to visit us. That's more important than anything else in the world. If you can get millennials to want to hang out with their parents, then you've achieved something, right? So what I'm going to do tonight is kind of walk through a little history about housing in America and New Jersey. And housing in America is directly tied to race. We don't think about it in those terms, but in actuality it is. So we're going to go through some history of housing and bring it up to today's current form of happening here in New Jersey. Is that okay? Yes, so I would warn you, there are some graphic images on these slides. Now, do I do that intentionally? Yeah. Because there's a purpose behind it. Okay? So, as you all know, housing means everything in this country. Most of the wealth that was created in America was through housing and through entrepreneurship. One of the things about New Jersey is it's so unique. It's a small state, but still has 566 municipalities. 566. Over 600 school districts. So when you think about property tax, because you know New Jersey funds its schools through property tax, and when you talk about property tax and schools, you're talking about over 600 superintendents, over 600 principals, you got 566 mayors, pensions, police officers. That's why the taxes are so high. It has nothing to do with affordable housing. The myth out there is because we have 566 kingdoms. Right? That's what they are, right? Little kingdoms. And we know that location determines opportunity where kids play, where they go to school, safety and employment, recreation, all these things determine really some of the outcomes of success, right? But here's a challenge for us here in America is to always put this in context. Because context, history of housing in this country, there's a context behind that. And that context is simply part of our history that's not talked about, that's not discussed. And it talks about, and what we really are ashamed of and we don't discuss is slavery. Right? The first slave at these shores were started on a plantation 1619. What year is this? 2019. How many years is that? 400 years our country has been putting in place impediments that African Americans can accumulate wealth through housing. 400 years. So we wonder why we can't get over these issues of race because we haven't really addressed it and resolved, or not even resolved, but we even had a discussion about what black bodies have meant to this country. What have black bodies meant to this country? Here's a question. Have you ever thought about what does it mean to be an American? Have you ever considered that? What does it mean to be an American? That's something that we don't think about, right? And here's another little known fact, or unknown fact, that's not important in our education system and our books, or our children will understand these things. Yet Africans have fought in every war that this country has ever had. Even the Revolutionary War. Even the war, the Revolutionary War, the fight for independence from England, African slaves fought in that war with the promise of freedom. Right? It was in fact that Africans came over here when there was one of the major ports in Savannah was threatened. The 13 colonies was about to lose it. And they brought some African French slave soldiers over to help save that port. Do you know what country those African slaves were from that saved Americans' port, that saved the 13 colonies? Do you know? Who said that? Yes. Haiti saved America's butt. Haiti, can you imagine that? The one that our president calls
That's right.
Haiti. Another known fact that we don't talk about. So the promise of freedom, fighting the Revolutionary War, didn't happen. The promise of freedom, fighting in a civil war. You do know that the Union was in trouble, right? And if it wasn't for Frederick Douglass and all that, the abolition imploring Lincoln to let these slaves fight, would have been in trouble. So the promise of freedom, the promise of equality, fighting in the Revolutionary War, fighting in the Civil War, and this is what we got. This is what Africans got. So it's very interesting when we look at these images, and they're graphic images, but let me explain something to you. We all learned about the Holocaust in school. We all saw those graphic images. And our psyche are used to seeing Holocaust images that are graphic, but not these. These are striking. What are the little kids watching? That's the most striking thing about it.
Sunday best.
So they would put out flyers. There's going to be a mention today. You can look it all up. And they would put them out, and the churches would go out dismiss early, go lynch someone, then go back to church. That was it. So the reason why I show these because in actuality it leads up to the era of Jim Crow. And one of the things about the Great Migration that's not discussed, you know, when we talk about the Great Migration, why did blacks leave the South? Anybody? Why did blacks leave the South? Opportunity. What else? Working. Thank you. You're the second person who mentioned lynching. Then let me explain that to you, because I was down in Montgomery, Alabama a couple weeks ago at the museum.
The lynching museum.
Yes. No offense to anybody who's from Alabama, I don't ever have to go back to that state again. Ever. Ever. Have to go back to that state again. The level of history that's in Montgomery that is overshadowed by these massive court buildings. I mean, when you go back to Dexter Avenue Baptist Church where Dr. King got started at 26 years old, it's less than a block away from the Capitol. Around the corner is the Confederate Capitol. Down the street is this huge court building. It is an imposing building that show you that black folks ain't welcome here. And if you do, this is just my opinion. I don't want to offend anybody who's from Montgomery, Alabama. But the history there, the bus house, the bus stop where Rosa Parks got off the bus, the Greyhound bus stop, the court, and in the main square with the tent, where the fountain is, where they had slave auctions. There's only a mention of it on a plaque that's about around the corner from where it was. It kind of like wipe out the history. You don't really get to see, you don't see it. I was stunned when I walked on Dexter Avenue. I was like, there is no semblance of civil rights at all. None at all. What they do celebrate every year, a huge parade and all the Confederate flags and gear that they have that marches through the streets. The Confederacy. I couldn't get out of that city fast enough. But this is our history. This is who we are. This ushered in the Jim Crow era, right? This ushered in, this is a video that I would normally show, but I'm not going to show it now. This ushered in the civil rights, Dr. King. This ushered in what was actually being done. So here's the thing that strikes me when I talk about this, when we're talking about race. How many ever heard the term black on black crime? Oh, sure. Let me see the hands, because I want to make sure we're hands down. How many have heard the term white on white crime? Not a single hand? Wait. You all heard the term black on black crime.
It was on TV.
But you've never heard the term white on white crime?
No.
So the idea behind black on black crime is that black people are more violent than white people, right?
Yes. Correct.
Do I have to go back to that slide to show you who invented violence in this country? Huh? Huh? I'm quite sure you heard when the mass shootings that happen around this country, even the little kids who were killed, I'm sure you heard on the news, CNN saying, oh, we white people got to do something about this white on white crime. When are the white leadership of this country going to address white on white crime? Have you heard that?
No.
So the image, the propaganda, the process of putting it ingrained in the American psyche about black skin hasn't changed since 1619. Think about it for a moment. What does it mean to be an American? The concept behind black skin has always been to exploit it, right? To destroy it, right? Slavery was about, the wealth of this country was built on slave labor. And it wasn't until I went to the National Museum in D.C., I've been there twice, it wasn't until I've gone there and really contemplated and thought about, no, it just wasn't American wealth. It was the wealth of the world. Slave labor was traded, and the commodities and the textiles, all that stuff was traded overseas to other countries. So wealth of other countries was tied to slavery here in this country. Can you imagine that? Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever thought about what does it mean to be an American? This is what they did to our young people, right? This is what they did to anyone who tried to get civil rights. And what Dr. King and toward the end of his life, Malcolm X, talked about human rights. Because civil rights are granted to those who are citizens. So, when we talk about race and housing integration, the last time this country had hope for true racial and economic integration was during the Reconstruction period, the short period of Reconstruction.
Very short. Yeah.
The short period of Reconstruction, that's when the 14th Amendment was supposed to answer the question, what does it mean to be an American? Liberty, justice, the protection of the law by the law. And we know that didn't happen because they pulled all the troops out of the South, and that's when the lynching period started. But prior to then, that short period of integration, blacks who was free with nothing, with no land, no education, started accumulating wealth. Was voted Congress in the 1800s. Can you imagine that? Early 1900s. Then the terrorism started. Right? Then the Black Wall Street. Anybody ever heard of that? What does it mean to be an American? What does the 14th Amendment say? Guaranteed protection under the law. Has African Americans ever experienced that? The policing system, do you know when the policing system started? What was it for?
Patrol, slave patrol.
Yes, the policing started with slave patrol. It's ironic that African Americans make up about 13, some may say 14% of the population in this country, or over 60% of the prison population. Is that a coincidence? So that's what they did when the black laws came out when they freed slaves, and they just, I hope you realize, because you do know that the 13th Amendment didn't abolish slavery, right? You guys know that? Are you aware of it? Yes. I don't believe it. Let me just...
Yeah, in the Constitution.
Things that Eric is crazy. Let's see.
No, it's in the
13th
Constitution.
Amendment
Yeah.
says. You got a minute?
Let's count.
I'm old. So, 13th Amendment says, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereby the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States of any place subject to this jurisdiction. You know what that means?
Exactly. Incarcerated.
Yes! Slavery still exists if you're incarcerated. So all they did was just start locking up all the ex-slaves. That was the answer. So we come to this era of the civil rights movement, coming up through the torture and the terror that existed during the lynching period. I like when Americans talk about terrorism. We invented terrorism. Did you realize that some of the tactics that Hitler used, he learned from Jim Crow? That's a history that we don't talk about. Our kids don't want that. So we come to this era, and the last time this country had a discussion about poverty and race, the very last time was when LBJ, and I'm glad there's no young people here because they might have thought I was talking about LeBron James. LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson signed the Great Society Initiative. That was the last time we had a real discussion about poverty and race in this country. Johnson. The last time we had hopes for real racial integration was the last HUD secretary who was actually doing what HUD office was supposed to do. Do you know what the HUD office is supposed to be doing? Anybody? Yes. It was created to create integrated neighborhoods and communities. That's what HUD is for, housing and urban development. That's what HUD was created for. The last HUD secretary who actually did that was this guy named George Romney. Does his last name sound familiar? You know who George Romney is? Mitt's father. Mitt Romney's father. Under the Nixon administration. And Nixon found out about it, they fired him. That was the last HUD secretary that was actually doing what the HUD office was supposed to be doing. Unfortunately, of course, Johnson got distracted by the war. Him and King got into arguments about it. And that was the last time we had a real discussion about race and poverty in this country. During the Johnson administration, he wanted to see why the riots was happening around the country. He commissioned the Kerner Commission to do a deep dive into investigating what's happening in urban communities in America. The Kerner Commission was 50 years ago. 50 years ago. And what they concluded was, can anybody see that? Can we read that together if you can see it? What
White Americans have never fully understood, but what the Negro can never forget, is that white society is deeply implicated in the ghetto. White institutions created it, white institutions maintain it, and white society condones it.
Kerner Commission.
The thing that strikes me about that statement is created, right? Maintained and condoned.
There's something missing.
What's that?
Benefits from.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Great point. Created, maintained, can benefit, and condoned. So this is the thing that's very interesting, because in some communities, or sometimes in our dissertation, there's a perception of white guilt, right? Or black victimization. This is not what this is about. This is about having a real discussion about where this country is and where it's going. This was 50 years ago, or almost 51 years ago. Last year, I met the last surviving member of the Kerner Commission in Baltimore. It was a big conference in Baltimore and in California. Satellite, whole technology stuff. We were talking to each other from the other side of the country. And the synopsis of it really, unfortunately, not much has changed. The commission just went away. I mean, the report itself was never really implemented. And one of the main things I asked the gentleman, I said, what was one of the main things you guys heard when you went to these black communities? And one of the main things that they heard, we need jobs. Jobs. Opportunity. That was one of the main features. And this goes back to housing, because your zip code determines what type of job you will get. When you fill out an application and you put your address and your zip code down, it's more likely you'll be hired or fired or hired or not hired based upon that zip code. This is going to be a heavy statement. This is going to be a heavy statement. Every last one of us that is in this room, that is either born or raised in this country, have racial bias. That's hard to swallow. You cannot escape it in this country. It's a fact of life in this country. It's a fact of how we operate, how we deal with each other, how we see each other. Every institution is based upon it. There is not an institution in this country that hasn't been touched with racial bias. Or, let me take another one. Most institutions in this country has been founded on white supremacy. Every last one of our presidents have been white supremacists up until I would say there may be 3 or 4. And let me clarify this. White supremacy is rooted in the ideology that whites are superior to blacks. Okay, that's white supremacy. supremacy. They believe that biologically that whites are superior to blacks. That's white supremacy. Racial bias is not as racial bias is because you've been schooled or you've been conditioned to believe such. Either that's true, white supremacy is true, black people are more violent, they're not as educated or they can't learn. So there's a slight difference between what's white supremacy and what racial bias is. Okay? I would say every president in this country, it's just my opinion, I'm just talking, okay? Every president, with the exception of maybe 2 or 3, were white supremacists. You understand my point? Even the great Abraham Lincoln himself was a white supremacist. That's hard to swallow, but he was. He didn't believe blacks were on the same level as whites. Henry Douglas talked about that. And he said, in this country, you would never have equality in this country. I advise you to leave. That was Henry Douglas' discussion. So we have to grapple with that fact, right? We have to grapple, when we're talking about race in this country, we have to grapple with that fact that we are tinged with racial bias. We have to grapple with something what James Baldwin said. Anybody know James Baldwin? If you haven't read Baldwin lately,
We have it downstairs.
We have it downstairs. Baldwin's downstairs.
If you haven't researched or listened to Baldwin or read Baldwin, you're missing something. So one of the things that Baldwin said that we have to grapple with is the fact that we've already been integrated. He said even blacks have to grapple with the fact that we've already been integrated. And why is that? He said because we have to grapple with the fact that it's more than likely that my great-great-grandmother was raped by a white man. Right? And the fact that great-great-grandmother was raped by a white man and would raise kids that were assumed that one day some possibly grow to lynch them. Right? The fact of the matter is that we've all been tensioned. Like, I love, can I, my black folks, I love, I got Indian blood in me, that's real love. We'll claim Indian blood in a second. Right, I got Indian, my great-grandmother had wavy hair like this. Every black person say, I got Indian in my blood. But we don't talk about the fact that we got white in our blood. Right? I did my ancestry DNA. I know some people say this, I did all that and then show where I come from and all that stuff. And going over some data with my daughter. And it was my daughter who is 26. And she just, a tear started rolling down her eye. And I was like, baby girl, what's wrong? She said, oh my God. Dobson isn't my real name. Yes, baby girl, you're right. Dobson is the last name of the slave master who owns our ancestors. And at 26, he just processed that. Actually, when I was in Montgomery, Alabama, in the Lynching Museum, if you ever had a chance to go through it, the first, and I shouldn't say this, but the first instinct after I started walking through, seeing these massive structures with all these names on them, and what's shocking to me was the number of lynchings that's done in the 1900s. I was expecting to see all 1800s, no. The one reported lynching in New Jersey is up in this area. You guys do know that, right? I was shocked to see the numbers of lynchings in the 1900s, and the families that were lynched. The families. Yeah. And instinctively, guess what I started doing? Thank you. Looking for my name. Looking for my family's name. It was crushing. Frantically trying to look in Urban County, Georgia, to see if there were my ancestors on that list. And I can imagine it's the same thing for the Jewish culture that goes to the Holocaust museums. It's just like when it hits you hard, right? And then I was like, am I running out of time? I'll talk about it. Am I running out of time? I'm going on time. Then I was thinking, I was down there for this group national organizations that deal with housing around the country. We peer network. We get together every year in different parts of the country, and we were talking, and there were folks there from California, from Louisiana, from New Orleans, from Mississippi. The folks that housed us there in Brian Stevenson place was there, and there was a museum that we went to, the Civil Rights Museum there, and actually when I was in Washington, the Emmett Till exhibit just struck me because as a kid, my godmother's parents lived in Mississippi. Mm-hmm. And every summer I would go to Mississippi. Oh, wow. Loved my time in Mississippi working on the farm. And then the first time I realized the level of, and I was a kid. The first time I realized that I was in danger, because at that time I didn't. We lived out in the country, rural area where rocks and so on. Our adventure was going to the blacktop. That's what we did. We played in the woods and played in the fields and stuff. But when we went into Jackson, we put us all in the car in a pickup truck. Everybody got a pickup truck down there. Yep. And they told all of us, it was about 6 of us little kids, now when we get into Jackson, when you see a white person, you put your head down, you don't say nothing to them. That's the first time as a little kid I realized the level of danger about racism. Now, we've experienced racism in the North, but to really just understand, and every time I see that or I think about Emmett Till, I cry because that could have been me. Mm-hmm. He was a kid from Chicago visiting his family in the South. I'm a talkative person. I talk to everybody, and as a little kid, I was the same way. I would have did the same. Hey, how you doing? I didn't think nothing of it. That's who we are as a country. I know we don't like to think about it. So when we talk about these issues of race, I remember on CNN we were talking about these issues, and then all the riots where the Ferguson stuff happened, and there was like, I love Anderson Cooper, God bless his heart. It's like, this is not who we are as Americans. And I was like, since when? Did he not get the memo? They talk about, the guy who holds the office now, like, this is disgusting, this is not who America is. I'm like, did I miss something? So, racial bias is a part of the housing. Have anybody ever seen this book, The Colored Wall? No? This is a must read. Richard Rothstein, I was on the panel with him. He's an educator. He sought out to study how we educate our kids about American history. He wanted to do research on it and study this, and because he's an academic. And he come across, look, he said, The Colored Law, a forgotten history of how the government segregated America. This book right here will change your perception about what we call structural racism. How, at one time, public housing was integrated. Did you hear me?
Yes, it was.
Public housing was integrated. The government systematically set out to shut that down. Redlining. This is a redlining map in Camden. Anybody familiar with the term redlining? Yeah. You guys know that? Great. Here's an example of redlining. Haddonfield and Camden. Anybody know anything about Haddonfield? Haddonfield is one of the most prestigious communities in New Jersey, one of the wealthy communities in South Jersey. You name it. It has some of the top schools in New Jersey. It is one of the sought-after communities in New Jersey. Anybody know anything about Camden? Yes. You all heard about Camden. Guess how far away from they are from each other? Not far at all. Less than a mile.
Somehow the tax dollars doesn't seem to show up.
Yeah. Isn't that ironic? This is the history of housing. Housing affordability in New Jersey, and this is the issue around affordable housing. The cost-burdened households spend more than 30% of their income on housing. $875,000, or 72% of New Jersey's low to moderate income are cost-burdened. 72% of New Jersey's low and moderate income folks are cost-burdened. That means they're spending more than 30% of their income on housing. Mm-hmm. A nationwide study showed that the underproduction, this is very important, the underproduction of affordable housing in New Jersey, 319,000 units, and from 2000 to 2015, that have made housing prices increase because we underproduced affordable housing. So that makes market rate housing go higher. Does that make sense? You understand that premise? And why there's been an underproduction of affordable housing? Can anybody guess? Anybody guess?
Nobody wants it. Nobody wants it.
Nobody wants affordable housing in their neighborhood. Because the perception about affordable housing. When you think about affordable housing, what do you think?
Black people. Black people.
That's going to ruin our neighborhood, the crime rate's going to go up, and black people, they're going to rape our women, because that's the right? You talk about a community that votes against its own interests. I did this presentation and talked to folks. We did a settlement in one town, and the mayor of the town asked, can you bring Reverend Dobson to come up and show them the income requirements for these affordable housing in our area? And the income requirements, like half the people in this room could qualify for affordable housing, but they was fighting it.
Yes.
And it all goes back to that racial bias. I'm running out of time. So, housing affordability in New Jersey.
You're good, son.
The rents have risen, it shows you.
I was just gonna say, if you want to go till 8, and then from 8 to 8:30, we'll have conversation. And then we have to be out by 9. So you have time.
I'm hoping I'll be done before 8.
No rush.
You talk about housing affordability and the rent and the prices of rent that's going up. You all know that, right? School segregation. New Jersey is, and this is everybody, how many heard this term? New Jersey is one of the most diverse states in the nation. Anybody heard that? Our politicians love it. We have one of the most diverse, but we are also one of the most segregated states in the nation. Diversity is just a nice term to give people images of how nice that all the ethnic groups in New Jersey get along and live near each other. That's not true. Yeah, we're diverse and segregated. And our school system is a big example of that. So this comes back to the history of affordable housing in New Jersey. This is the origins of the Mount Laurel Doctrine. What we do was blacks was living in Mount Laurel since the 1800s, since Reconstruction, because they moved from the South because of what? Terrorism, lynching, and murder, and we're getting it now. Not just jobs.
Well, some were here because there was slavery here.
There was slavery up there as well. Slavery was going in the north.
Probably right here.
Yes, yes. So you're living in this area, and that's New Jersey was using its zoning powers to zone for exclusionary housing, zoning for 1 acre, 2 acre, 3 acre, 4 acre lots. So these folks were living in some substandard housing. They wanted to meet, hey, listen, we own this property, let's build some apartments. The mayor at that time said, if you folks can't afford to live in our town, then you just have to leave. They were living there before the mayor was there. This led to some court rulings. The court ruled that everyone must provide a fair share of housing. From the regional fair housing, the basic constitutional obligation of the state to control the land, and the land existing control, not every resident. So basically, every town must create a realistic opportunity for affordable housing. So the growth in high opportunity neighborhoods, this is what matters, right? Because this is a game changer. They find that neighborhoods affect children's long-term outcomes through exposure effects. Every year, a child grows up in a higher opportunity area leads to better outcomes. Larger gains when the children are young at the time. So when children move, when their zip code changes, their health outcomes increase, their education outcomes increase, right? Their parents' employment opportunities increase, right? What does that do? It changes generational cycles of poverty. It gives African Americans, Latinos, the opportunity to get out of a system of poverty into higher opportunity neighborhoods. This is what's shown through the Mount Laurel, Mount Laurel, Doug Massey, principal professor, did a study of 40 years later. Remember this slide? Remember this one? Yeah. This one right here. If you people can't afford to live here, you just had to leave because there was going to be high crime in Mount Laurel. There was going to be, school system was going to be ruined in Mount Laurel. Housing values was going to go down in Mount Laurel. I always say this, rape by white women, because that's what they always said from the 1800s, the birth of the nation. Right? didn't mention the fact that the slave owners were raping black women.
At will.
Let
And men, black women and men.
me say this. There was a time, a period in my life, I thought the hardest thing in this world was to be a black man in this country. And I realized the hardest thing in this country was about a black woman. What black women had endured from slavery. It's just unprecedented. Not only have your children ripped away from you, but being raped and impregnated and raising someone else. You should read the Willie Lynch letter. If you never read that, that's a must read. Little pamphlet, and there's some controversy about who wrote it, when it was wrote, is it girl, is it this? But if you read it, give you some insights into what this whole thing was about. So from this slide to this slide, let's see what happened. Did Mount Laurel crime rates go up? Did their housing values go down? Was the schools ruined? Well, lo and behold, the crime rate didn't go up. The housing values didn't go down. The kids showed vast improvement to schools. Mount Laurel has one of the best school systems in the state, one of the best communities to live in South Jersey. The sky didn't fall when we put affordable housing in Mount Laurel. Imagine that. There's been a study that showed that property values increase when you do affordable housing in higher opportunity neighborhoods. Imagine that. That integration actually works. We know it works because historically it worked. We know the economics behind integration. So I love my conservative friends, and I'm quite sure you live around some of them. They say, oh, we got to cut programs and stuff. So the first thing to go is social programs. We got to cut them. Yeah. Costing our country too much. No, what's costing our country too much? Segregation. Because if this works, and we know it does, there's a case of a woman who lived in Mount Laurel, who lived in this Lawrence development. Family there, zip code change, she got job opportunities, got a promotion, worked her way up, moved out of Apple Lawrence and bought a house in Cherry Hill. So what does that tell us? If you want to get rid of government subsidies for low-income people, integrate.
$1 billion companies.
That's true.
Yeah.
You know, the largest number of government subsidies go to corporations, right? The largest welfare cream is Walmart. Right? That's what most of our government subsidies go to, right? So this showed that didn't happen. But let's think about this for a moment. If we know this works, where are we today? Anybody know this photo? What is this photo? Water. It's Maryland.
Is that Maryland?
Ferguson. Now, look at how these gentlemen are dressed.
Yeah, that's their mindset. It's the training.
Yeah, this is again, this goes back to the discussion about race, black skin, right? What is this? So back in the 1900s, well, and the 1900s, they wore, you know, sheets and stuff, or hoods all over their face. But now, look at this group.
Yeah, old enough, right?
And what's so unique about this group?
They're young.
Not just white, but what are they? Young. The greatest threat to American society is now this psychologists are talking about this are angry young white men. The greatest threat to our society. Because they're being brainwashed. Guess by who? Parents. Not just their parents.
Society.
Who said that?
Society.
By us.
The micro and
This is a product of us, of our culture, of our society. Who was that?
Dylan Bruce. Dylan Bruce.
Dylan Bruce.
I think it's a different type of devil.
Yeah.
Walk up in a church.
And pray.
To pray with you and then shoot people down. That's a different type of devil.
But here,
That's still a devil.
no. well, this is the same pattern from the lynching period.
Right.
This mindset from the 1900s to 2015 hasn't changed.
And they call him a murderer afterwards.
Who's that?
Those are the victims.
This is Charlotte.
Oh, yes, smoke those people down.
I think he was primarily blaming at the brother and everybody else just got into it.
Here, who were saying, like, we haven't had a real discussion about race in this country to the point where we got to admit some things about who we are as a society.
Yeah.
And housing still plays a key factor in that. This is housing data from 2015-16. Look at the number of mortgages in Philadelphia between blacks and whites. Housing has shaped a lot of that wealth and a lot of that perception.
That's that.
Right? This is 2016 data. Look at this.
Those are beautiful.
Yes.
You're absolutely.
Guess what these pictures of my neighborhood. This is my neighborhood.
He's so beautiful.
So we know what we do in our neighborhood. We got potatoes on every corner.
But how many of those businesses are actually owned by black?
No.
What?
This is my favorite right here. Cigarettes, ice cold beer, fried chicken, soda, any seafood and steaks.
Any seafood is different.
And let me explain something to you. This is not a different part of my neighborhood. This was within 5 blocks. These are within 5 blocks, right? You have this, that within 5. There's 2, 3 bodegas right around the corner from my house. And this is down the street. The beer. This is right down the street. And we're out protesting. I was out protesting one that's going to be right. They actually built a block away. I was saying, how are you going to have another one of these a block away? But that's what they do. There's another one a block away from me. And of course, you got to have a black church. So in order to address these things, there's no strategy, and I'm wrapping up. We do, at Terrence, we do the litigation. We do organize our religious community, our business community, our civil rights community, media. Now, why do I say media? Because a lot of what we learn and what we understand about black people is through perception and propaganda. But propaganda is a very important part of our country. We are today faced with the fact that Russia has invaded our elections and used propaganda to manipulate our elections. Propaganda is a very powerful tool to send a message, to create a message. It is the message that was created by slavery in the beginning to project black people. That's why we're still having these issues of housing and race. Propaganda, white supremacy, perceptions about what black skin is. This is how we can help. Identify faith leaders, identify civil rights groups, identify, and let me be clear, why I say faith groups, because whether you're religious or not, is not my point. When we talk about the institutions that were founded on slavery and helped manufacture and build slavery, profited from slavery, religious institutions was one of the main ones. You can't leave them out. They got a lot of things to pay for. Thank you. The banking system, the education system, the political system, the insurance system. Right now today in New Jersey, many insurance companies in New Jersey use credit scores and credit scores to determine how much they're going to charge for insurance. So every institution needs to be addressed. And again, this is how we're doing it. So this is one of my favorite last slides of it. Let's read that together.
The ultimate tragedy is not the oppression and cruelty by the bad people, but the silence over that by the good people.
The fact of the matter is, there is more good people in this country than bad. And let me take that term, good and bad. There is more people in this country that have a conscience than those who don't. The problem is, we're not really ready to risk losing our status, our relationships, and our friendships when it comes to confronting issues of race. Okay? That's one of the main factors. What drives this country is about status and economics, right? if I address racial bias, how many people will I lose? How many friends, how many family members will that offend? Will my job be at stake if I address racial bias?
Bad people want power.
Yes.
So when you go against those in power, it's like you're literally going against the police and law enforcement.
True. And that's why policy is important. Policy and voting 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 is important. Dr. King said, listen, yeah, you're talking about how you love people, and they were talking about legislation. You can't legislate love. He said, you're right, you can't legislate love. But legislation can keep them from beating me up upside of my head. Right? So I'm going to close, and we'll take questions. I'm going to close by saying this. We have to come to grips with the reality and really start to shape and change the way we perceive our country's history. And really start talking about the real history. Everything that most of what you learn about American history in school is a lie. You have to come to grips with that and say, okay, if that was a lie, then what is the truth? Now, a lot of it will be shown here today. And then once you learn the truth, according to the scriptures, help me out, Reverend Porter, the truth shall know the truth, and the truth shall
set you free.
A lot of people don't know the truth.
They don't, and that's why
They
they
don't want to know the truth.
Some people say, there's another scripture that says that folks would rather believe a lie and be damned than believe the truth.
That's right.
But let's not concern ourselves with those folks. Because as Dr. King knows, there are some people out here that we can talk and have an intelligent conversation with about these issues.
Reason together.
Come, let us reason together, saith the Lord. Though your sins may be as scarlet, come and talk. I'll make you clean. I'll bring you pure. I'll cleanse your soul and your spirit from bias and racism. Hear me out now.
It's the same thing.
Hear me out, man. I want to be very clear about what I'm saying. Because we're born in this country, because we're socialized here, and I said this before, we all have racial bias. That's not the issue. The issue is when it surfaces, do you address it? Or do you just push it back down? That's the challenge for us. First, admit that we have it, and it's okay. Because we're socializing, we all have it. The point is, when it surfaces, will we address it? That's the difference between the so-called good people and bad. Address it. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Pastor Porter, do you want to join us?
Oh, I've been here.
Well, anyway, thank you so much. That was so moving, and I'm thankful that you're giving us all, you're challenging everybody to really think, and I agree exactly with what you said. It's not, we've all been socialized, but what do we do when, do we look at it? Do we look at ourselves, examine our hearts? Anyway, we have time for questions and conversation, and who wants to start? And please, Pastor Porter, jump right in, because you're involved in fair housing in our local area. In fact, I'm wondering if one of you has something to say about what's going on in Monmouth County and Fort Monmouth, for example, all that property there. I'm going to just try to keep an eye on everybody who puts your hands up. And,
I thought it was very good how he shared about Alabama, the antebellum South, because I had an opportunity to speak to an older gentleman at the trust. He was a trustee at the church named Mr. Jones. And he shared that before he was drafted in to go to the World War II, he said he would rather be in the jungles of Guam than where they first sent him to. And I said, well, where did they first send you to? How much you gave for my Atlantic Highlands? He said, they sent us to Alabama. And they were waiting for us in crowds. Now, we've just been drafted to go serve the country, and they were there in crowds. And we called that the antebellum South. And the antebellum South has just a history of the raw psyche of the manifestation of what racism can really be. So I felt that was deep, that in 2016 or 2019, you said you went to go visit Alabama, and how you still felt that you know,
That road.
That's
Yeah, that was 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, yes.
And I will say there are some folks down there doing some great work. Some white folks down there doing some great work. This young lady who stand up in the face of some of these folks who celebrate the Confederacy and talk about it's not about race, it's about history. And she said, well, have you visited the Lynching Museum? Because this is about history too. And for that young white lady to do that engage with someone like that, because I'm not stupid. White folks was killed in the Civil Rights Movement as well.
Right. But you know, I think they're so, they deal with the reality of it that is out in the open, while up north, we have more of a covering on it.
Oh yeah.
And because of that, and then it sort of has this, the policies, I mean, when we see the outcome of it, the mass incarceration, the homelessness, even with the affordable housing, we have to have 750 credit score. When if you're black, I bet, because it sounds like a black code. It's another way to cherry pick to say, you know, I feel like this group should have this, but not this group. So if I put it in the policy, then that's going to meet it out, and it's just going to, the equation is going to play itself out. So up north is more under a different type of obscurity, you know, and even having to tell the history. If we tell the truth, it really is the truth that sets us free. So I agree with what you're saying, but the north is pretty
savvy.
It's bad.
Yeah, very savvy.
It's very, you know, it's kind of worse in a way, because if I go down there, and I don't need to take this off course, I always notice how black folk can go down south and get a nice job, go home. My son, for his own house, you know, I mean, they have the HBCs and the HBCUs where all that nurturing is going on. The churches are very active. The churches are very still strong, it seems. You know, they understand that the advocate for black folk is something that you really have to stay on, because it's because of the situation that this colonialism is what we're dealing with. That you can't just be lax and be like, oh, you know, black folks have had enough. You know, but that's what goes on up north. And so, even though you see the Confederate flag, you see that, you also see tremendous strides because they're dealing with it, okay, out in the open. While I think in the north, we're not dealing with it. One reason is because of big giant fines and being thrown in jail for no reason, you know, and getting these, you know, having children not being able to afford housing. And so the equation meets out a domino effect where black folks end up looking like this. We end up being in that situation. So I think the research is right on.
I'm going to be clear, the racism and the structural racism and is all across this country, it's north and south. Me personally, I'm not living in the South. That's just me, you know, I'm not doing it. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm in Trenton almost every other week, every week fighting against these policies that are instituted to disrupt the wealth gap in the state. The average white family wealth in the state of New Jersey is over 120,000. The average black family accumulation wealth is 7,000. So I'm in Trenton every day, every other week, fighting to deal with this racial wealth gap in this state. Now I get it. I'm just saying, for me personally, you know, I'm not living. I can't live in this.
Do you work sometimes, or are you connected to Reverend Barber, who does the Poor People campaign?
Yes, I know Reverend Barber.
Could you tell the folks, those who don't know, what he's doing?
Well, Reverend Barber is a national figure. We're in a poor people family, but I have more. I'm let me rephrase this. I have more of a connection to Reverend Porter, who's doing work right here in this community around affordable housing. You know, Reverend Barber is a national figure, and I appreciate the work he's doing. But I look up to this gentleman, who's really providing affordable housing, who's on top of that.
I just want to say something about Reverend Porter. I mean, he really is the real deal. He cares about everybody in Red Bank, not just his congregation, but everybody. And the same with him throughout the entire area. We're really lucky to have him.
Reverend Porter, can you tell us about what's going on with affordable housing here in Mama Town?
Well, first of all, I wanted to thank God from a friend, Reverend. How y'all doing? I just want to thank my friend, Brother Eric, for the presentation. Every time I have an opportunity to hear him share with the passion in which he does, it's just inspiring. And for anybody that's out on the battlefield, if you will, you want to be inspired by those who are intellectually gifted, but also passionate about that which they do. I'm appreciative of Ms. White, always for her kindness. She sent me an email about learning more about Eric, but I wasn't.
I got no response.
I wasn't giving you that. And we're grateful to the Red Bank Library and T. Thomas Fortune for having this wonderful night and having everybody out. Listen, affordable housing, my first passion is my faith and my congregation that God planted me in a wonderful place called Pilgrim Baptist Church, for which I'm indebted to God because it has opened up wonderful opportunities to be engaged in other type of social engagement here in the Red Bank and Monmouth County and other areas. It's because of the work of the Fair Share Housing. Eric is not just, Reverend Dobson is just not advocating for fair share housing, but he's really passionate about legislation. The policies in our communities and the zoning policies and the planning and zoning board policies do not change in New Jersey, we will be straddled with substandard housing as it relates to affordable housing. And because they're on the front lines and trying to really engage communities like Red Bank to be very sincere and committed to having plans that really is about inclusion and not about segregation. Because of fair share housing, we have been able to negotiate with the city of Red Bank, the borough of Red Bank, for affordable housing plan, and shows you how corrupt the process is that there is affordable housing trust fund that each community has established to raise funds for affordable housing projects. What Red Bank was doing was using those affordable housing trust funds to defend themselves against having affordable housing in the community. And it was a loophole that exists that has been closed up because of the advocacy of the fair share housing and other policies that have been established. But there's a tremendous, we are fortunate, I'm also the executive director for the Red Bank Affordable Housing Corporation. We are now because of the work that we've done with Cedar Crossing has become a model for many municipalities. I had the pleasure of speaking before the legislators down in Trenton at the invitation of Fair Share Housing. And what it was the argument of many municipalities is that we cannot afford to have affordable housing in our community because we can't afford the expansion on school districts. We can't, the infrastructures, we can't afford to develop proper infrastructures for roading and things of that nature, because their concept of affordable housing was poor black people. Therefore, they were renters, and they're going to be more of a deterrent in our communities rather than approaching our communities as being part of the positive part of our communities. We changed the narrative with Cedar Crossing, the little project right behind here, 36 townhouses that were developed not for rentals, but they were developed to give families an opportunity. We called them starter homes when I was coming up, but they weren't for rental, they were for home ownership. We have 36 families that are tax-paying members of the Red Bank community that are part of the volunteer base of firefighters, Little League coaches, and whose kids are involved with public schools, who are not a burden on the tax rolls, but they actually pay taxes. That narrative and that model has changed the mindset for many municipalities who say they can't do affordable housing, because we proved you can in a very progressive community like Red Bank. But we also have to be careful. We're involved with Fair Share Housing and negotiating with Rumson, the community of Rumson, who is a unique community to say the least. And they have deep pockets. My daughter calls them deep pockets, by which they can defend themselves until the cows come home. But it wasn't until Fair Share Housing really began to work with them and negotiate with them that now we're at a point there may be a settlement in place. But what that means is that this is what's happening now. And you need to be aware of the biases and the racism that yet continues. Because there's still an anti-affordable housing effort in Monmouth County. Monmouth County is one of the wealthiest counties in the country. Yeah. But yet it is the one county that's still defined and is still holding on to the old boy network. And they're doing it with a lot of passion. And so now they've learned how to work the system when it comes to affordable housing, just to exclude families of color from coming in and having opportunities in all of our communities and not just our urban communities. And what they've done now is they've become wise. And they have recognized that affordable housing is available for everyone. So now they're getting their wealthy kids who are graduating from college to afford to go and apply for affordable housing based on their own income. And the law allows them to do so. So now these communities are being filled by children of wealthy people who live in those communities, just to keep people of color out of those communities. So there are systemic practices that yet continue that we need to be aware of, because if you're going to talk about affordable housing gives opportunity to those families and individuals that all they want is to have the opportunity for home ownership or to live in a community like all of us. So we're going to fight that fight. You know, we're going to continue to press. Red Bank, we've now become the Red Bank Affordable Housing Corporation is now the administrative agent for the borough of Red Bank, which means they cannot do anything without us approving them doing it. And what that means is the T. Thomas Fortune House here has affordable housing set-asides, and you would never know, because those families are a part of the community. The rail, the new project that's going up that you saw in Asbury Park Press, and everybody's celebrating that Red Bank's back again. We made sure that there's an affordable housing component that gives opportunity. When you're talking about rent, all right, on the low level in the rail project, about $3,200 a month, who can afford that? I mean, you could be a working class professional and still can't afford that. You could be a civil servant and still can't afford that. So it just puts a burden. Yes, there's a group that can afford it, but that's the minority. That's not the majority. And so you have the rail project that's coming up. West Side Lofts has been built and has affordable housing component, and you don't see the deterioration of that community. But yet there's 20 families that live there that are active and a part of our community, and no one would never know it's affordable housing. The other part of it is that we're holding developers. We don't want your affordable housing not to look like your other housing. We're going to inspect it, and we're not going to pass it until it does comply. So there's so many things that we can be involved with. The Element. How many of you know about the Element? The Element is a new development right on Front Street. Right, the Element, it starts at $5,000 a month rental. Who can afford that? Who can afford that? But that particular development, instead of having a set aside of affordable housing, they decided to pay into the trust fund, which is the borough, and we have oversight over the trust fund now, which the borough cannot use the trust fund as a discretionary fund. They can't use it to defend themselves in legal matters.
So what happens with the money that goes into this trust fund then that is not being used now to fight not having affordable housing here?
Well, first part of it's going to help Pastor Porter's daughter get to college? No, I'm just playing. And the first thing somebody said, I knew that black preacher was trying to take him. No, what's going to happen, we're going to roll out, and Miss Beata Sykes is a former board member of the Red Bank Affordable Housing Corporation. She's now come off the board because her focus is going to be on the 2020 election. All right, and at 81, she wants to make sure she uses her time wisely. Amen. So one of the things, and I'll share this with you so everyone knows, you will hear as part of those funds, the trust funds, we're developing two projects. The first project, both of which will be rolled out in in August. The first is a home rehab program. So if you're here in the community of Red Bank and you have a home, you own your home, and you need some work done in your home but cannot afford it, we can give you a grant up to $10,000 to $15,000 for your home. So you'll hear about that, and just give us a call. And then finally, if you're looking young and you're looking to get into Red Bank and you want home ownership, we'll have a first-time home buyer program that will give a $10,000 grant to anyone purchasing a home in Red Bank. So we're using those funds to invest right back in our community to help residents. But we hope our model with Cedar Crossing, our administrative agent model, as well as our work with Fair Share Housing continues to make a difference in New Jersey. So that's what we're doing here.
And this gentleman and this lady, and then
I just wanted to mention that there's a lot of building going on around Red Bank. And if you talk to anybody, they say, well, who is going to rent these or buy these or whatever? And they say, look at the advertisement. And each one of them, such as the Elements, tells you who they really started out for, because they all use the word luxury. And luxury means usually one thing, money. So if you don't have any money and you see luxury up there, then you say, oh, that's not real.
Yeah.
And just watch each one of them.
And I agree with you, man. There's language that's used on posting for the discriminating community, for the wise senior. There's all kind of propaganda, as Reverend Dobson had said. Please, if you see anything in the community of Red Bank, you know what the mistake was for Red Bank when I first got here? Was the mistake? I was invited by the mayor then, Mayor McKenna. Y'all remember Mayor McKenna? This was back before you see the development in Red Bank. They wanted to get young minds involved. I was young back then. They wanted to get young minds involved with helping with development in Red Bank. And they put us on a committee that was to explore what was known as the Shrewsbury Corridor. That was a plan back then, about 12 years ago, to develop what you see now. And if I had not been part of that discussion back then, I would have never been able to advocate for the way I am now, because I knew what was coming. It was just a matter of time before it came here, but it's here now. And now we can be a part of it and really take advantage of the opportunities that exist. And that's for all of our community. Yeah.
Reverend Dobson?
Yes.
I have 3 questions, and you can answer it as shortly as possible. And my phone just went off. Okay, so, and there's a point. Okay, so the first question is, does racism stem from slavery?
Does racism stem from slavery?
Yes.
In America, it does.
Okay, that's the first question. Second is, what's the difference between slavery and
It's a good question.
Messages are coming from above.
what's the difference between slave masters and serial killers?
Slave master and a serial killer. I mean, that's. I don't think that.
I don't think that there's one, but I'm asking you.
Well, I mean, these are so obviously slave master has dehumanized, because again,
Right.
African slaves weren't considered human beings, they were considered property
By law.
by law. So that dehumanizing impact allowed them to do unthinkable things just like serial killers do.
Right.
So I remember I was reading Howard Thurman, he was talking, he was playing with this little white girl, and she jabbed him with a pen, and he started bleeding because she had no idea that he had red blood. So these are, again, American concepts around black skin. So yes, there's not much difference in terms of the mindset about human bodies, particularly in black bodies, in terms of slave master.
Right, because if a slave had got away, wouldn't they be compensated by the government or something like that?
Absolutely.
Okay, so my third question is, are racists supporters of a serial killer's ideology?
I would say white supremacy
Right.
folks are, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
One quick question and one slightly longer. When was this going on in Red Bank with the town? I'm relatively new to Red Bank, so when did that stop, that the city stopped using the trust funds to fight affordable housing?
When did that stop? Before you even tell when that stopped?
Yeah, that's a question.
When we brought it to their attention.
That wasn't that long ago.
It wasn't long ago, and really, it wasn't really to expose anybody, and call them to task. It was to, in a very political way, share with them that we are aware of what is happening and that we want to be part of the solution.
Right, well, that's very tactful of you, but I'm stunned